Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving headfirst into a massive piece of American history, Upton Sinclair's 1906 novel, The Jungle. Now, you've probably heard of it, right? It's that terrifying book about the Chicago meatpacking industry that literally changed how America eats. But behind all those gruesome details of tainted meat and factory horrors, there's actually a fascinating literary detective story. What if I told you that one of America's most famous muckraking novels was built on a totally hidden blueprint? Today, we're going to see how this iconic work was secretly modeled on a 19th century French masterpiece. Okay, let's dive into this huge paradox. Sinclair famously said this about his book: "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident, I hit it in the stomach." You see, Sinclair didn't actually set out to write a book about food safety. Actually, scratch that, food safety wasn't even the point. He wanted to write a passionate indictment of capitalism. He wrote it as this huge rallying cry to expose the brutal exploitation of immigrant workers. But his descriptions of the meatpacking plants were just so grotesque that he accidentally sparked a massive food safety revolution instead. So, to understand how this all happened, here is the roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll cover 1. The accidental food revolution, 2. The naturalistic blueprint, 3. Childhoods stolen by capitalism, 4. Adult struggles and degeneracy, 5. The workplace as monster, and finally, 6. The power of storytelling. Starting off with Section 1, the accidental food revolution, changing how America eats. We begin with the raw, totally unexpected power of a novel to trigger immense, real-world change. And this timeline brilliantly illustrates the stunning speed of Sinclair's impact. I mean, it's wild. In 1904, Sinclair spends 7 weeks undercover in the Chicago stockyards, literally rubbing elbows with the workers to document these awful conditions. By 1905, it's serialized in a newspaper, and the actual book drops in February 1906. Just months later, by June 1906, public pressure was so intense it forced the government to pass both the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act. Sinclair's novel did in a few months what decades of political lobbying completely failed to achieve. Moving to Section 2, the naturalistic blueprint, Sinclair's secret model. Now here is where we get to the incredible twist. Sinclair's visceral, totally horrifying style of storytelling, it didn't just appear out of thin air. He actually had a template. Drawing on this really fascinating academic thesis by Mohamedul Amin Young, we can see how Sinclair heavily modeled his formula on Émile Zola's 1885 French masterpiece, Germinal. Just as The Jungle exposed the meatpacking plants of Chicago, Germinal exposed the harrowing conditions of the coal mines in France. And as we'll see, the parallels between the two are definitely no coincidence. So both of these guys belonged to this literary tradition of naturalism and muckraking. Basically, this meant applying scientific methods of observation directly to literature. Both men used the exact same investigative method, which meant putting themselves in sheer physical danger by going undercover. In 1884, Zola went down into the French coal mines to live and breathe the life of the miners. 20 years later, Sinclair did the exact same thing in Chicago's packing town. They believed fiction shouldn't be polite. It needed to be truthful, exposing the brutal, unvarnished facts of industrial exploitation. Look at this table. It's crazy how perfectly these character archetypes map onto each other across both novels. Sinclair effectively just translated Zola's French miners into American immigrant meatpackers. Zola's rebellious protagonist Etienne becomes Sinclair's fiercely proud Jurgis. Zola's fragile Catherine becomes Sinclair's tragic teenage wife Ona. And the steadfast maternal figures, Mahoud and Tita Elzbieta, both of them endure unimaginable losses while fighting tooth and nail to keep their families alive. Let's look at Section 3. Childhoods stolen by capitalism, the most vulnerable victims. Here we can see how this blueprint builds into a shared thematic focus. Both authors knew that to truly shock their readers, they had to show the system chewing up the absolute most vulnerable members of society. Notice the parallel tragedy of the disabled children in both stories. Zola gives us 9-year-old Alzire, who bravely tries to help her family but freezes to death searching for coal during a strike. Sinclair totally mirrors this with Christophorus, a crippled boy who tragically dies from eating tubercular pork, which was a direct result of the unsanitary food production Sinclair was exposing. Both children are effectively killed by the very industries enslaving their families. And, for the kids who actually do survive, the environment just twists their innocence completely. Both authors expertly demonstrate how a punishing environment forces innocent kids into delinquency just to get by. In Model, the boy Jeanlin becomes a shrewd thief, eventually committing a shocking murder just to survive. In The Jungle, young brothers Philemus and Nicologus are sent out to sell newspapers and very quickly learn to trick trolley conductors out of car fares. To them, stealing from corrupt companies feels like fair play. It's a deterministic view. The environment is pulling the strings here, not bad morals. Moving right along to Section 4, Adult Struggles and Degeneracy, the breaking of the spirit. It wasn't just the kids getting crushed by this machine. We also see a direct mirror in how the environment crushes the spirits of the adults. Both writers use the tragic suffering of young female characters to expose the horrific exploitation of female labor. In Germinal, Catherine has to endure the harsh conditions of the mine and the abuse of a coworker. In The Jungle, young Ona gets severely sick from sewing hams in a freezing factory and is ultimately forced into becoming her boss's mistress just so her family doesn't starve. Both young women die prematurely, treated entirely as expendable resources. And the male protagonists? They follow the exact same cycle. Both Etienne and Jurgis go from victims to rebels and then right back to victims. When they find out about the abuse the women in their lives have suffered, both men just snap. They give in to primal instinct and violently attack the abusers. The result? Both are blacklisted. Driven out, they both resort to wandering and alcohol, hitting absolute rock bottom before finding a brand new identity as messengers for the socialist movements. I mean, the blueprint is practically identical. Next up, Section 5, The Workplace as Monster, the Pathetic Fallacy. As we analyze their methods, we see both authors turn the physical workplace into an active, super dangerous enemy. So this is known as the malevolent, pathetic fallacy. It's basically a fancy way of saying they gave the factories beast-like traits. Sinclair lifted this technique directly from Zola to make the buildings feel like hungry monsters. Zola's Vorox coal mine is described as having giant intestines, while Sinclair's packing town is a perpetual explosion of smoke, like a literal hell on earth. Both guys present the capitalist machinery as these cannibalistic, devouring entities that literally feed on human flesh. Just listen to this visceral description from Zola's Germinal. For half an hour, the shaft went on, devouring in this fashion, always hungry, with its giant intestines capable of digesting a nation. Sinclair directly adapted this intense digesting imagery for his meatpacking plants. When Jurgis first sees the continuous stream of cattle on the killing beds, the machinery of death is completely overwhelming. In both books, the industrial beast swallows the workers whole. Which brings us to our final section, the power of storytelling, fiction changing reality. To wrap up our explainer, we have to look at the ultimate historical takeaway here. Think of Sinclair's famous paradox like an iceberg. The visible tip, the part the public actually saw and immediately freaked out over, was the unsanitary food production. That panic is what gave us the FDA. But the massive hidden base of that iceberg, the part Sinclair and Zola actually meant to expose, was the crushing reality of wage slavery. They wanted the world to see the human cost, those invisible workers suffering behind the products we consume every single day. So as we reflect on the incredible power of storytelling to create real change, we have to bridge the gap between 1906 and today. If Germinal exposed the coal mines and The Jungle exposed the meat packers, we have to ask ourselves, what gig economy realities are hidden in today's jungle? Right now, where are the invisible workers suffering behind the modern conveniences and the rapid next-day deliveries we all consume? It's a question Sinclair and Zola would absolutely be asking today, and it definitely leaves us looking at our own world just a little bit differently. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.